We are pleased to have Deputy Secretary of State Randy Bolerjack joining us today to speak about the weight of your vote and how you can stay informed and engaged during elections. The office of the Secretary of State was established with the adoption of the Washington State Constitution in 1889. The Secretary of State is the state's chief elections officer, chief corporations officer, and supervisor of the state archives. Randy graduated from Washington State University with a degree in political science and received his master's in public administration from American Public University. From 2015 to 2021, he served as an administrator to the Washington State University Everett campus, as well as becoming a founding member of Engage Everett and serving on the Economic Alliance Snohomish County Advisory Board. He is also on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club in Snohomish County. Randy was appointed as the Deputy Secretary of State in 2021 and has served in that position since. Thank you, Randy, for being here today.
Of course. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm thrilled to be able to participate in this small way in the festivities around Constitution Day. We are at the Office of the Secretary of State. It is one of the constitutional offices in Washington State government. By way of background, the Washington's current Secretary of State is Steve Hobbs. He was appointed in 2021 to the position by Governor Inslee when the prior Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, was appointed to the Biden administration. And then Secretary Hobbs was subsequently elected statewide in 2022. Prior to that, he served in the state legislature, in the state Senate, for about 15 years, serving constituents in Snohomish County. He's from Lake Stevens and represented that area, Snohomish, Marysville, and parts of Everett. He is also in the Washington Army National Guard currently, where he's a lieutenant colonel. And he has served for more than 35 years, including active duty tours to Kosovo and Iraq. So he and I got to know each other in Snohomish County, where I'm from, and actually where I am currently sitting in Everett. Normally I would be in my office in Olympia, but I've got some sick kiddos, so I'm helping out with those little guys right now. So I'm up in Everett in Snohomish County, but we got to know each other here in Snohomish County, and I think it's a brief story of kind of involvement that I think that you all are showing by even showing up here today. When you see opportunities to get involved in the policy process and with policymakers, it can be a really impactful thing to just say hello to those folks, say hello to your legislators, start a conversation, whether it's getting involved with their office, with policies that you see that you're showing an interest in, or getting involved on their campaigns. And that's how I started a conversation with then Senator Hobbs a while back, and stayed involved with him while pursuing my own career kind of in public administration, which has led me to this point. But a little bit more about the Office of the Secretary of State. We oversee, as was mentioned, elections statewide. We support the Washington State Library and the Washington State Archives. We have the Corporations and Charities Division that handles all of the business filings of businesses and nonprofits and charities in Washington State. So every nonprofit that you volunteer for has to have a public record of their existence. By law, the legislature says this, so they file through our office. One of the I suppose the largest area that most folks know about the Office of the Secretary of State is elections, of course. The meaning of your vote is so immense. And I think that there is a nice spotlight that we saw in this primary election of how meaningful that vote is. In the statewide race for the Commissioner of Public Lands, after the first count, there was a gap of 51 votes between the second and third place finishers. And that's really important because after the primary election, the top two finishers in that election move forward to the general election. So 51 votes separated who was going to either move on to the general election or not move on at all. Thank you for your participation, but you're done, and we've got two candidates for the general election. That is a wildly close vote. And it immediately triggered upon certification, when we knew that number, a manual recount, or what's more known as a hand recount of that election. Now, there has not been until this a statewide recount of a primary election since 1960, and there hadn't been a statewide recount of any election since 2004, and that was the very contested 2004 gubernatorial election between Dino Rossi and Chris Gregoire. I recognize that I'm talking about some names and dates that are so far in the past for a lot of you that I am one of the oldest folks here, so I'll try not to dip too far back into that that political trivia. But it is a large process, and that went through multiple lawsuits, and there are a lot of folks who still have strong opinions about that process. So when this recount came up, there was the chair of the state Republican Party actually had tweeted out and stated in a number of interviews that, my goodness, this is incredible. What an opportunity to kind of audit the process, audit the tabulation machines that are used in every one of the Washington's 39 counties. And there are different systems in every county because it is the county auditors, or in the case of King County, the elections director, who actually conduct the elections that we have in Washington state. So after that process, the hand recount, we ended up, the vote totals changed, or the difference changed by only 2 votes, which that is an incredibly close margin, like a 0.0000 kind of difference. So we are just incredibly proud of the election workers throughout Washington state at the county and the state level for the incredibly detailed work that they did, and that they were able to do it efficiently. We always talk about the importance of doing it right versus doing it fast, and they did an incredible job. And interestingly, the votes, when you have a little bit of some of those discrepancies, we've got things called overvotes and undervotes. An overvote is when someone may have voted twice in the same race, which you can't do. or an undervote in which you don't maybe vote for anyone in a particular race at all. Well, in the hand recount process, we're able to find some folks that, maybe had didn't look like they had voted, but perhaps they used like a shiny, glossy ink for their vote. We always recommend using a dark pen for that. It's easy for the machines to pick up. But something that, yeah, those didn't pick up, but the hand recount noticed that the voter intent was to vote for this person, and we got those and made sure that everyone's vote was counted and that their intent was heard in that election. And my goodness, a difference of 49 votes uh, telling from who's going to go on to the general election or not is incredible. And that is a statement to the power of everyone's vote. Just in this Zoom room, I see 84 participants. And I think the poll earlier noted, I believe that there were 14% of folks responded that they had not, were not registered to vote. And even that difference of 84 folks here and 14% of those, just that small handful of potential votes, that could mean the difference in some contests for your elected officials. So always remember that there was I think it was the city of Rainier recently where the difference of the vote was just one vote. And I don't think that it was either I don't know which one of the candidates, if it was the incumbent or not, but one of them chose not to vote for themselves, just didn't feel like, I don't know if it was a matter of, felt a little too much ego in voting for oneself, but didn't. And that spelled the difference in that race. So the vote matters even in these high vote total races. What I would encourage then for those 14% who haven't registered, go register to vote. Go to votewa.gov and register. We make it really, really simple to register to vote for all eligible voters. So please take that the few minutes to go on there. We recently worked on legislation that was signed by the governor that allows you to include information in the voter registration process, kind of verify identity by using a driver's license, by using the last 4 digits of your social security card. So we're continuing to take steps to make access easier for eligible voters. So I encourage you to do that. But hey, voting is just one element of engagement with our political process and with your government. So it was heartening to see a few of those values that were described in the slide earlier, connecting, mobilizing, educating. That's absolutely necessary to have a strong impact on our broader process. So to that, maybe I'll talk a little bit about legislative process because it is very complicated at times and can also be seen as quite simple at times. You're probably mostly too young to remember seeing Schoolhouse Rock or watching a lot of these things on Sesame Street. That said, I am confident that YouTube has provided a good home for that, so it wouldn't surprise me if most of you have seen a little bit of Schoolhouse Rock. But that is very much the 101 level of how the legislative process works. And there are multiple touch points in the process when developing legislation that when you are visiting Olympia, you're going to be touching in probably multiple areas along the process, and depending on the date, that the point of the process is going to change. So you need to first have legislation to introduce, or an idea. Just the germ of an idea is sometimes enough to get that process started. Sometimes that will be about a higher education policy. When I worked for Washington State University, and particularly at the Everett campus, we were very focused on providing students more resources to get books, for instance, that were digital copies, cheaper versions, effectively. We wanted to require that cheaper versions were available to everyone, that maybe you didn't need the 14th edition, that maybe the 12th edition was going to do you just fine with those books. But you had to have that, you had to start with the idea that came from really years of engagement, years of listening and talking with students, with faculty. Sometimes they are the ones who are writing those books. It's talking with publishers, because they have a vested interest in every one of those new editions in this example. There are always going to be folks who are interested in either a change to policy, or why this policy was the way it was written, why a system exists as it does right now was probably because someone tried to get it that way. So there's going to be someone who is probably interested in keeping that policy as is. So you've got to have lots and lots of conversations about who's going to be involved in this, about what your idea is, and then start working with legislators. They're the ones who are going to introduce legislation. They're going to write some legislation. Their staff members are going to write legislation. By the way, as far as a career path goes, that's an incredible one, to work for legislators, to get that experience actually drafting legislation. I've had lots of ideas for legislation, particularly in the last session, about our public libraries. We have experts that, I talk about an idea, but you don't necessarily want me typing out all those details. There are experts in that, and you can become those experts. And by the way, they're typically very well paid too, because that is an important expertise. So following that pathway is important. You're going to work with then legislators who are in various committees. Every bill does not go before the full body of either the House of Representatives or the Senate. It has to get through a committee process, which is usually just a smaller group of legislators who are going to work through all those details. They're going to work through it with interest groups. If it's about education policy, they're going to talk to students. They're going to talk to various constituents of theirs who are interested. A lot of those who are they're gonna have lobbyists. By the way, another way to, as far as careers go, get involved in lobbying and working for lobbyists. They will help show you a lot of this process, some of it that's not readily seen in the news, and they're incredibly valuable. They are often, it's not just relationships and money, it's expertise that they frequently bring. So it's not a bad place to go learn. And just because someone is a lobbyist doesn't make them scary or bad. There are lobbyists for incredibly good causes. I've worked with many of them, including from the College Promise Coalition, that are doing incredibly valuable work representing the interests of a lot of people in this room. So you're going to go work with those legislators in their committees. You're going to polish legislation. They're going to be legislators who have no idea what you're talking about. So you have to go educate them about why it matters to you. And by the way, those are the most important stories, talking about why it matters to you, how something impacts you, how a new idea can better your life, can better your kids' lives, can help launch you in a career. That is going to be incredibly powerful. And so then there is a long process of getting that both through committees, but then getting it to the body of the larger bodies of the legislature to get that legislation passed. And lots of work with folks who are not necessarily voting, but who are going to talk to the people who are voting. So it is incredibly valuable that you talk to those staff members, to those legislators at every point along the process. Once your bill has been introduced, your job is just getting started, and the impact that you can have is just getting started. So I'll just I'll encourage you to visit Olympia. And by the way, when you do come to Olympia, come by the office of the Secretary of State. Come say hello. We'll make a state seal for you. One of the cool roles of the Secretary of State is that they are the custodian of the Great Seal of the state of Washington. So that has to be hand pressed in our office, but we can bring you in to do some of that. The other thing I'd encourage you all to do: learn and listen. There is so much to learn. I came out of college with a lot of opinions and not a whole lot to base those opinions on. There is so much to learn. There is so much opportunity for you to really use those superpowers that you identified earlier. I remember community engagement, local political involvement, reading legislation and testifying. Absolutely do those things. Step outside of your own world to find diverse ideas from your friends, from folks you would never come across in your daily life. We're all busy, right? There's a lot going on. We're not always going to get outside the bubble of the 10 or 15 people that we talk to. I certainly remember that when I was much younger. Local political involvement is absolutely beneficial, whether it's volunteering on campaigns, building those relationships with lawmakers. Find someone inspirational who's not in office but is thinking about running. Don't just focus on the federal government, where there are probably, yes, lots of volunteers and a big pool of folks that you'd be working with, but find the local stuff. City council races, you can make an incredible impact. If you volunteer for someone running for city council, you may be the one volunteer. You may build an incredible relationship with that individual that's going to provide dividends for years and years and years. Go volunteer. That doesn't have to be in politics either. One of my proudest volunteer works is with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Snohomish County. That puts me in touch with folks I would not see otherwise, folks in different life circumstances that I can learn from. That is absolutely valuable to the policy process once you want to get involved in it. And it's just good knowledge for life. I was speaking with Jordan a moment ago before I came on about getting the degree in computer science and also being involved in this policy process. Jordan's not a political science student. I was a political science student. There's not as much value as you might think in that political science wonk background, because there's so much more to the policy process that you need to hear from a computer science major. There is so much happening in spaces of technology, AI, that doesn't need a poli-sci input. Again, someone with a lot of opinions, but not a lot of background to base those on. You need someone with expertise and a background in education in some of these other areas. And that's true across the spectrum of degree programs that you are experiencing right now as college students. So take advantage of that. Don't ever feel like there is an access point that isn't necessarily for you. Give it a try. I promise that the folks involved there would love to hear your perspective, your different perspective. There's so much value to that and to your engagement. I also, and maybe I should, I've been yapping for a while, and I should probably shut myself up a little bit. But I do want to encourage your generation to be so involved. I think about now. I've got some little kiddos. I've got a 2-year-old and a 9-month old, and you start thinking about what world they are going to live in. And there are so many changes that I want to see for them. And there are so many changes I'd like to see for you. And I thought about when I was at Washington State University, the students who were there, there are all these problems. I was thinking, my goodness, how have we not addressed this yet? Can we please check this box so that this generation doesn't have to deal with the same stupid stuff that we were dealing with? Well, that's going to be true for generations to come. There's always going to be value. Please get involved. We need you. We need you so desperately to be involved, to let your opinions help shape the future, because you are going to be shaping the future, and you're going to be shaping the future for my kids. So I need you, just personally, and it's very selfish, but I need you to be involved to help make that world a better place for the next generation after you too.